Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Jack from Cultaholic.com and it's Friday and you bloody know what that means. It's my favourite time of the week, and that's because it's time for my wrestlers of the week. Now, we have a little thing to address before I get on with this video. Last week I suggested that maybe this week's could be a double episode like WrestleMania, but I guess the response was way more mixed than I thought, and I think we may have even had more people saying not to do a double week and to keep that special for WrestleMania. And I you know what, I gave it some more thought, and I think I do agree. And even though we had SummerSlam, TakeOver, and the G1, I think I've managed to choose 10 wrestlers that give a nice overview of all the great quality wrestling that we had this week and especially this past weekend. So, fair play everyone, well done for showing restraint and for not just going for the double points week straight away. I think actually we've managed to protect the sanctity of WrestleMania weekend in doing so. We have saved WrestleMania. You're welcome, Vince. So with that out of the way, before we begin, we do have some honourable mentions to talk about. The most requested honourable mention, or at least the person that everyone wanted me to get on this list this week that I couldn't, was The Fiend, or Bray Wyatt, or whatever you want to call him, and I really wish there was space for him to be on there. I know it was just a squash match basically, but the entrance, the spectacle of it all, I couldn't not give him an honourable mention, and if this was a slightly less impressive week, he would be in the number 10 slot, I think, just for his entrance alone. But sadly, it was a really strong week, and I couldn't quite fit him in. Huge honourable mention for The Fiend, or Bray Wyatt, or The Fiend Bray Wyatt, or whatever we're going to call him. Some G1 lads that couldn't quite make the cut, Tanahashi, Naito, Moxley, Juice. You know how the G1 is, it throws up a lot of people, way too many to include in one week. Thankfully, the G1's over, so that's quite a relief. The Street Profits as well for retaining their tag team titles on TakeOver, and also as well, Dolph Ziggler, my new favourite wrestler of all time. Just ever, because that was so good. The promo was the funniest thing I've ever seen. The spears were sold wonderfully. I would have loved to have put Dolph Ziggler on this week's list, but unfortunately, I couldn't quite justify it. But Dolph, you're the bloody best, you. Number 10 this week, Candice LaRose for putting on one of the best matches on the TakeOver Toronto card alongside Io Shirai. Candice finally has a big, intense match to be proud of in her NXT career. She's obviously got countless excellent matches on the independent scene, particularly in the sort of California independent scene, like PWG and that sort of thing, often alongside her regular tag partner back then, Joey Ryan. But now, in NXT, she's finally had a big sort of coming out party match and has been able to show a wider audience just what she can do. I know that often a criticism of NXT's booking, and there's not that much criticism of NXT's booking, it's by and large quite excellent, but one criticism has been that Candice is often just Johnny Gargano's wife, and I think it's great that she's now got a feud of her very own to just make the most out of, and she can really get her teeth into it, and she's doing exactly that, even in the role as the underdog babyface. This match was far more 50-50 than I thought it was going to be. Candice was very impressive too. Yes, Io kicked out of her finisher, if Miss LaRose's Wild Ride is still her finisher, that swinging neckbreaker from the second rope, but, you know, Io's on a big tear at the minute. She's just turned heel, she's having a massive push. I think the only thing that held this match back, in fact, was the predictability of it. We all knew that Io was going to win, but I did not expect Candice to come so close, and even though I know that she has as good a performance as that in her from her indie career, I didn't know if we'd see it on TakeOver. I didn't know if they'd get the right amount of time or it would be the right sort of match, but 100% it was. Well done, Candice. You are my number 10 wrestler of the week, which doesn't sound that good. It was a very strong week. Number 9, big bloody Brock Lesnar. Bloody hell, let's not waste any time. Brock Lesnar lost the Universal Championship, but when Brock Lesnar loses, it is massive. Whenever he loses, whoever beats him gets put over huge. And you could argue that, you know what, Brock didn't actually have that much to do in this match, even for a Brock Lesnar style match like the ones against Goldberg, the one against Balor, I'm thinking, at the Royal Rumble as well. Even for those sort of matches, in this one you could argue that this was less about, you know, Lesnar and more about his opponent. Lesnar had less to do, he was just kind of selling, he wasn't dishing out as much punishment as he typically does, and it was a fairly short match, but at the same time, every single thing Lesnar did was really, really effective. And it's the upside to Brock Lesnar. The downside is, of course, that he doesn't appear that often. He sometimes wins the belt and runs away with it forever. But when you see him, and often also he just squashes people that you want to see beat him. But when he does lose, or when he does have a competitive match with someone, it is more often than not absolutely phenomenal. And that's exactly what we saw at SummerSlam. I don't have too much more to add. I do wonder what Lesnar's going to do next. Will he crush another Money in the Bank ladder match randomly next year? I don't know, but you know what? I think this reign, this shorter reign of his, was more worth it than the first one. Moving on swiftly now to number 8 this week, and still your NXT champion, Adam Cole. babe. Oh my God, I can't even bring myself to say it. It's just something that he can do, and I'm just nowhere near cool enough to be able to. Anyway, Adam Cole is number 8 this week because he had a divisive match, I'll say, in the main event of TakeOver Toronto. He had that 2 out of 3 falls match with Johnny Gargano, which was effectively a 3 stages of hell match. The first fall was singles, and I really enjoyed it. I thought they were countering counters and doing all this kind of stuff, and I thought it was really effective, especially, or maybe only, if you've watched the other matches in their rivalry so far. But they played off it well, the history between them, it was all awesome. Then it ended a bit weirdly, obviously, when Gargano took the chair to Adam Cole, but then we moved into the street fight portion, which was more of a classic WWE crowd brawl kind of thing, getting everyone back into it, and then that final fall with the insane bump at the end. I enjoyed it, I think, more than the general consensus did, but I do admit that it was a little bit long. I think it was about 51 minutes or something. Apart from that, I really enjoyed it. I don't even know if it could have been shorter. I think that an epic match was required to end this feud. I hope it is the feud ender. But you know what? I don't have too much of an issue with it going really long. I think sometimes a long match is justified, and I think this was one of those instances. I don't think it was the best match of the year or anything like that, but I do think it was a really good one. I do think that Cole deserves these 3 points. Number 7, Johnny Gargano. You know what? Even though he lost the match, I think that Gargano's moments in the match stick out more in the memory for me. Obviously, there was moments with the pair of them, like that big tumble from the top of the cage at the end. But the thing that stands out for me wasn't just, you know, the 2 guys reversing all of each other's moves in the first fall, but Gargano getting all of the crowd right on his side in the second fall, which was really impressive given the fact that in the build-up to this match, the fans were kind of flipped. They were cheering for the heel Adam Cole over the babyface Gargano. But Gargano is such an effective babyface, I think one of the best faces in the entire world, that he can just get a live crowd on side just by his mannerisms, his body language, and of course, obviously, his actions in the ring. There were 1 or 2 questions about the ending of the first fall, which I briefly mentioned when I was talking about Adam Cole, which is that Gargano deliberately got himself DQ'd. A lot of people were like, why would he do that? That's really stupid. I get it, kind of. He wanted to get that singles fall out the way so they could move on to the street fight and he could just batter Adam Cole. And importantly, it's really consistent with Gargano's character. He is always a guy who lets his emotions get the better of him, often, you know, sometimes for better, often for worse in these big matches. It's cost him before against Ciampa, it's cost him now against Adam Cole. I think it's a nice little consistent thread throughout the course of his character in the NXT main event scene. Next up, number 6, the Rainmaker, Kazuchika Okada, the current IWGP Heavyweight Champion, who had one of the best straight-up matches this week against Kota Ibushi in the final, unofficial final, I guess, of the A block in the G1 Climax to determine who would go on to the final match. And I mean, obviously this was a wonderful match between 2 of the best and most naturally gifted wrestlers in all of the world right now, all of the world right now. But I also think that it was really cool because it opens up various possibilities going forwards. We now know the match for Okada at Wrestle Kingdom. That title match is a lock, but it all depends on whether Okada is going to keep hold of that championship until January. I'd be very shocked if he didn't, but he's got a pair of interesting matches coming up, one against Suzuki and one against Sanada. Now, I think he'll beat both of those guys, but at the same time, I think they'll both be excellent matches as well, and Okada could really make a charge up the league table towards the end of the year. I also enjoyed the storytelling of this match through the booking too. Obviously, Okada is the champion and very dominant, but I think most people predicted that he would lose this match and not progress to the final. That's because, you know, New Japan rarely, if ever, I'm not certain about the facts, but not since I've watching at least, they rarely have champions win the G1. Maybe never, who knows? People will know, let me know in the comments down below. But it's one of those situations where they've never done it, so they could do it any year. And with a dominant champion like Okada, that would kind of suggest that maybe they would do it this year. They didn't. I think it was the right call. Okada looked great in defeat, as he always does on the rare occasion that he loses, and it set up a really tantalising run to Wrestle Kingdom. And if he is still champion by then, an excellent, I'm sure, main event. Number 5, we all know him, it's Will Ospreay, but this week it was the biggest win of his career, I think. In any other week he would probably have been Wrestler of the Week, but it was an astonishing week for wrestling. There were some amazing performances, but just in terms of like big wins in both a kayfabe and non-kayfabe sense, I guess, I think Will Ospreay has had maybe the biggest win of his career this week against none other than the ace himself, Hiroshi Tanahashi. This is Ospreay's biggest scalp in his New Japan career and probably his entire career. And not only that, but it was a wonderful match. Again, another divisive one. Meltzer and Alvarez were nearly coming to blows over like whether this match was a good one or not. Meltzer thought it was good. Alvarez hated it because he said Ospreay didn't sell the leg enough. I don't know if he was watching it well enough, because at one point I'm sure he suggested that Ospreay did some kind of springboard move, maybe the Os Cutter, off both legs, and Meltzer was like, no, he did it off one leg, and then Alvarez was like, he didn't, Dave, he didn't. Or like, I think Alvarez I get his points quite a lot. I get that Ospreay maybe could have sold the leg a bit more because Tanahashi was just really working it over throughout this match with his signature offense, dragon screws and that sort of thing. But Alvarez seemed to think that this should mean that Ospreay just cannot do any flips or any dives. But I think the story was, and I think that he conveyed it pretty well, I think the story was that he was fighting through the pain at points, and then at certain stages the pain would catch up with him. Maybe I'm just making excuses, but I think that was a deliberate factor in the match. But anyway, in my opinion, it was a great match. I thought the performance from both men was great. Ospreay especially selling the shock of the win afterwards like it was the biggest thing that had ever happened to him, which it potentially is. I mean, it's a huge win. It really shows that New Japan are ready to push him into the proper main event scene at some point. We don't know when, but at some point. And I'm really scared for that, because the more high-profile matches he has, the more chances he'll have to put in like amazing matches, and the more amazing matches he does, the more points he'll get. Number 4, Io Shirai with just the biggest performance at NXT TakeOver Toronto. She is now the coolest thing in NXT right now. I mean, and on a roster containing the likes of the Undisputed Era, being the coolest thing on that roster is no mean feat at all, but Io's done it. This heel turn is perfect for her. She's coming out, her mannerisms, her facial expressions, the music, the lights, everything is awesome. Second best entrance we saw this week, behind obviously Wyatt, but also her in-ring ability can completely back it up too. Her match with Candice was many people's favourite of the night. I can't quite decide between that and the main event, but it was really, really good. I'll give her that. I mean, her performance was great. She looked really strong, as I mentioned, kicking out of Candice's signature moves, but Candice also kicked out of Io's signature moonsault. This then led to a wonderful moment where Io debuted her new finishing submission hold, which was a devilish, can't remember the name of it, but like a devilish Zack Sabre Jr. style thing. Various different limbs getting trapped, and it just fit her new intense evil persona. I love it. I think she is guaranteed almost to be an NXT Women's Champion in the very near future. The only thing is, obviously the current champion is also a heel. So do we get heel versus heel, and does Io send Shayna on her way to the main roster? Or does Shayna lose it to someone else, and then Io beats them and they're like a transitional babyface champion? I don't know. But either way, I think as long as we end up with the belt on Io, I'm not going to complain too much. Number 3 this week, let's all just take a second. Let's all just calm down and let's breathe with the bloody switchblade, because this week's number 3 is Jay White. Now, I mentioned this in my review of the G1 Climax final show, that normally the G1 Climax final is a work rate contest between two guys who may be faces, they may be heels, they may be tweeners. It often comes down to just who the crowd prefer, but there's no clear dynamic. This year New Japan switched it up and they gave us the most clear example of a heel versus babyface G1 final. In one side, Kota Ibushi, a massive babyface. On the other side, Jay White, just the biggest dickhead in the world. Jay White was excellent here, coming off the back of Kenta's shocking heel turn earlier on in the night, and I should have given an honorable mention to Shibata and Kenta for that angle, because that was the hottest angle of the year so far, or one of. But anyway, coming off the back of Kenta's shocking defection to Bullet Club, Jay White walked out, all of the Bullet Club in tow, including Kenta. Yes, the referee sent him to the back, but they just looked like an excellent stable once again. It was really nice to see. Even the night before that, even before the G1 Climax final, even in the B block finale, White was healing it up massively. They had a great match with Naito, not quite as good as the other semi-final, but he had a great match with Naito to secure his quite shocking path to the final. Everyone thought this would be Naito's year, and then afterwards called out Ibushi, injured his leg, and he was just such a classic traditional heel about it, and he plays that role so well. And then the final itself, which I've watched twice because I nearly fell asleep on stream watching it because I was so tired because I watched SummerSlam the night before and I hadn't slept. But the match itself, I'm pleased to report, was not a boring one. That's not why I fell asleep. It was actually very, very exciting indeed. One of the best G1 Climax finals ever, but that doesn't really say a lot because the past 4 or 5 years have all given us one of the best G1 Climax finals ever. But still, it was a really good and enjoyable match. A little bit more traditional, maybe a little bit more of a blend of WWE booking, storyline sort of stuff with the heels getting involved, blended with New Japan style epic storytelling, a mixture of strong style and King's Road if you know your Japanese wrestling styles. And yeah, it was just awesome. It was a great match. Jay White lost, which was absolutely the right call. If he'd won, I think that would have been very controversial indeed. But I think it was the right decision, and I think Jay White played his role to perfection. Number 2 this week, the self-proclaimed best wrestler in the world. No, let's give him a bit of slack, because this was a big week for this man. The Architect, the former Architect, the Beast Slayer, the King Slayer, burn it, it's Seth Rollins. Rollins gets a huge 9 points this week, not just for his performance in the match with Lesnar, which was great. I know it was a shorter match, but Rollins was excellent in that match. But also just because of the way that he reminded us all that he's a very good wrestler, and for all the things that he said both in and out of character that people have gone, ugh, and cringed at. at the end of the day, he's brilliant in the ring. I would just like to point out as well that I was right. I predicted that Seth Rollins was going to win because he promised us on Raw, and while I said that in a slightly joking way, I also thought it was weird that basically they'd have him promise to win and then have him lose, especially with them pushing him as this ultra do-good, everyone loves him babyface. They've had so many people put Rollins over: Austin, Bret Hart, the Street Profits, anyone who can make him look respected or cool or both. But despite all of that, and despite being given, the Cena / Reigns treatment a little bit, and despite, occasionally putting his foot in it outside of character, despite all of that, he still proved that he is a great wrestler and, given the chance, a great babyface if the booking works. The booking certainly did work. A lot of credits to Lesnar and Heyman as well for building Rollins up as the babyface. But in the match itself, as soon as he flipped out of that first German suplex and landed on his feet and hit the curb stomp, everyone was suddenly Team Rollins again. And I don't think just anyone can do that. I'm not saying flip out of a German suplex and land on their feet. I mean, I can do that. It's easy. I can't do that. I mean, not everyone can just flip a switch in the crowd and remind everyone, look, I am the guy, you will cheer for me, you actually do want to, and I'm about to win the belt, beating this monstrous man. That wouldn't have worked for a lot of people. And beforehand, if someone had told me the plan of the match, I'd have gone, he'll still get booed. He didn't. I mean, I would have been wrong. It was a strange main event, a great one, and also, I think, just a brilliant performance from Seth Rollins. And number one, and my Wrestler of the Week, he hasn't been Wrestler of the Week this year so far, which I was really surprised at, given the fact that he is one of the front runners on the league table. But he was Wrestler of the Week a few times in 2018. He's done it again this year. It's Kota Ibushi. That's right, Ibushi won the G1 Climax and staked his claim as the next ace of New Japan. I don't know if that's going to be quite true, because I know it's ridiculous looking at him, but I think Ibushi's 37. He's certainly mid to late 30s, whereas Okada's younger. But at the same time, Ibushi has just been on the end of this monumental push in 2019 so far. He obviously beat Jay White in that excellent match in the final. He also had another of the best matches of the week against Okada in the semi-final. He gave me no choice but to pick him. I couldn't really choose anyone else apart from Ibushi, really. And also, he's got that main event at Wrestle Kingdom. Now, as we've mentioned, that main event's probably going to be against Okada, Sonata, or Suzuki, and out of those three, it's probably going to be Okada. Now, we've already seen Okada and Ibushi in that semi-final match, but it did feel a little bit like they were reserving some things for another event somewhere down the line, which probably will be Wrestle Kingdom. I think that main event could be an early match of the year 2020 candidate. Oh my god, it's 2020 next year, I'm so old. Also, I think that Ibushi could be Wrestler of the Week next year. I don't think he'll do it this year, but I think next year, getting off to that hot start and potentially winning the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, I think he could be Wrestler of the Year 2020. God, that's a long way away. Why am I even predicting that right now? But congratulations, Ibushi, not only on your G1 Climax victory, but the more significant victory of this week, which is of course being Wrestler of the Week. Why wouldn't it be? Now let's take a look at the league table. As we can see, Ospreay is still very much in the lead, but Ibushi has drawn level with Ishii in second place. Okada, Gargano, and Jay White all pick up points as well. It's been a very top-heavy week. In fact, I think we have to wait a little bit until we get to the next person who picked up points in the top 25, who is Adam Cole. He jumps up into 18th position, past Phoenix and past Jon Moxley. Come on, boys, what on earth are you playing at? Letting Adam Cole get ahead of you like that? Sort it out. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.